It is a simple fact of life that human beings will die without shelter. Therefore, much human attention throughout history has been dedicated to the creation and maintenance of structures. Cities are a network of structures, systems, and ideas, an environment created entirely by humans for humans. Yet, despite being made for humans, cities can feel alienating, if not outright hostile. Cities like Toronto, Canada, have a dualistic nature, a place that millions call home. Yet those homes come at a steep price, and with a steep price comes precarity and instability. Housing is both a necessity of human life and this country's largest industry. Toronto now ranks as the second most unaffordable city in North America. Homes, housing, houses, condos, apartments. In many ways, our society is built around these things. As such, housing is a highly complicated system of finances and social pressures. By understanding some of the reasons for housing unaffordability, we can gain a wider understanding about Toronto, its history, its people, and how housing shapes society. The factors that lead to a city becoming unaffordable are numerous. There is not one load-bearing cause that leads housing prices to skyrocket. Further complicating matters is the fact that the housing crisis is really only part of the general unaffordability crisis that we all face. However, there are some things that contribute to Toronto's unaffordability crisis that we can explore. Take a look around Toronto. You might notice something strange. Namely, all of the tall condo towers right next to single-family homes? While this may seem entirely normal, take a look around other world-class cities. You might notice they look a bit different. Toronto, like most North American cities, is plagued by what is known as the missing middle problem. What is the missing middle problem? Well, it's defined in the Canadian Urban Institute as
missing middle describes a range of housing types between single detached houses and apartment buildings that have gone missing from many of our cities in the last 60 to 70 years.
Essentially, middle housing includes buildings like duplexes, townhouses, and walk-up multiplexes. It also includes buildings where people can live and work. We've all seen apartment buildings above small businesses. They are a vital part of creating neighborhoods that are both more vibrant, convenient, and affordable. Now, Toronto does contain some middle housing, but more often than not, it was built in a different era. Toronto has had a long history of both progressive urban design and setbacks. In fact, it was as early as 1912 that the city made an effort to ban residential apartment buildings from residential neighborhoods. Moreover, with the widespread adoption of the automobile in the mid-20th century, North American cities, including Toronto, began to be built for cars rather than for people. In the world of the automobile, middle housing became almost non-existent. This is most evident when looking at Toronto's Yellow Belt. Let's take a look at this map. The areas in yellow have historically been mostly restricted to having single detached family homes. Other areas of Toronto are zoned for both commercial and industrial uses, so very little of the city has historically been allowed to contain dense housing. Multi-unit buildings have typically only been allowed to be built in the downtown core and along major streets. So historically, Toronto has been surrounded by zoning laws that prevent the construction of anything other than a single detached family home. The missing middle also affects the walkability and sense of place of communities. Neighborhoods with a mix of stores, cafes, and public spaces unsurprisingly give people a positive sense of place. A study by the American Planning Association found
Our findings suggest that mixed-use neighborhood designs that enable residents to shop and socialize within walking distance to their homes have direct and indirect effects on happiness.
People generally feel better when the places they live are safe, friendly, and nice places to walk around. Middle housing also improves affordability with a wider selection of building types that allow for more homes to be built within a smaller area. The history of Toronto's Regent Park neighborhood provides insights on the complicated nature of urban design. Originally, Regent Park was a working-class neighborhood that was close to the city's downtown. The area was bulldozed and turned into a social housing project in the 1950s. Unfortunately, the social problems related to poverty, such as crime, addiction, and mental illness, became concentrated in Regent Park. Furthermore, the physical buildings themselves had fallen into disrepair and neglect by the 2000s. In the year 2002, Regent Park began its second process of being razed to the ground and rebuilt. Regent Park has been slowly remade over the last 2 decades. The revitalization project saw city planners adopt a mixed-use approach when designing Regent Park's new buildings. Private condos, rent-tier-to-income apartments, and commercial rentals all made up the new buildings, alongside recreational and cultural centers. It should be noted that these revitalization efforts were largely possible due to public land becoming privatized. Only about 1/3 of the cost of the redevelopment project came from the city. The rest came from private investments. Regent Park's redevelopment project has largely been seen as an urban design success story. However, the shift from public to private has had its fair share of criticism. Namely, how the project relates to affordability and gentrification. In 2023, one member of the Regent Park Members Association was quoted as saying,
"I'm wondering who they're building housing for. Are they building it for the 80,000 on the waiting list for Toronto community housing? Or are they building it for folks who have a lot more disposable income and are trying to enter the housing market or trying to get more affordable rentals?"
Scholars have noted that while the financialization model did create the funding necessary for the redevelopment, it also created a situation where the neighborhood's original residents were at risk of being alienated. Regent Park, and its many rebuilds, highlights the tenuous nature of housing and communities in urban environments. It shows city planners attempting to balance growing a neighborhood while making sure not to displace the people who originally lived there. It also shows the city growing and changing over time. One of Toronto's most famous neighborhoods is Kensington Market. Kensington has had a rich history of being the home to many new immigrant families throughout its long history. The neighborhood has seen notable habitation periods by Jewish, Portuguese, and Caribbean families, all making their mark on the area. What made the neighborhood famous was the fact that many of these newcomer families set up storefronts in front of their houses, or converted the first floor. This created a unique open-air market that is still in use today. In the 1960s, Kensington Market was designated for redevelopment much like Regent Park. City planners wanted the open-air market to be moved into a shopping mall. But unlike Regent Park, the idea was dropped after local pushback. This is not to say that every one of Toronto's neighborhoods needs to become like Kensington Market. But it should be noted that one of the city's most vibrant and interesting neighborhoods came about when its citizens decided to build out their own community in the way they saw fit, rather than strictly following the designs of urban planners. There is potential for the residents of Toronto to adopt a more organic way of creating housing. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, are essentially small apartments or suites that are apart from a main residence. They can be separate buildings, additions, converted garages, or even basement apartments. ADUs are favored by urban designers since they are a non-disruptive way of increasing the housing supply. Something like a converted garage can make use of the city's pre-existing utilities, and can typically be built for less money than a unit in an apartment building. In fact, this is one area where the city has been making strides, having legalized laneway houses as early as 2018. The history of Kensington Market shows us that good things can happen when people build their own cities. Perhaps in a similar vein, ADUs are a good way to help Toronto's housing situation. From a distance, it just looks like a bunch of buildings. But in reality, it's millions of human lives tangled together in one big mess. Cities are in a constant state of growth and change. Housing is a complicated part of our society. It's a mess of planning, finances, and social pressures. Although really, at the end of the day, everybody needs a place to call home. Tommy Thompson Park may seem like it was made by a natural process. It was not. Instead, this park was made from the rubble and brickwork from the city's bulldozed buildings. It's a graveyard, a place where the city's old bones stick out of the ground. The weathered bricks, tangled rebar, they're a reminder that just as a place can be made, it can also be unmade.